Your course content might be brilliant, but if your clients are spending mental energy trying to decode what you mean instead of learning what you're trying to teach, then brilliance doesn't matter. And I know, because I am brilliant. I'm Dr. Catrina Mitchum, and I have been designing and redesigning courses since 2009. I haven't really talked about engaging course content yet because it's so important to start with actions and steps and tasks and goals, and content should be created to support those things. So the engagement problem with content is often meeting learners where they are, right? And helping them to think about the content and mentally engage with it, not just consume it, right? And there's a distinction there. Consuming is just reading without really retaining or interacting with the information. You want them interacting with the information. So we need to make it clear, and we need to connect the abstract to the concrete for the right level. The reason for this is that complexity makes the mental load heavier, right? The more complex or the more involved or the more abstract the thing that you're trying to teach them is, the more mental capacity it requires at any given moment. We can only process so much new information at any given time. And if it's not new information, then it's also really easy to get bored. And that's where that right level comes in. So we need to make sure that our course content doesn't need to be decoded or translated, and that it's at the right level for who is in the course. Clients abandon courses when they feel lost or when they're not actually the target. So you're selling advanced stuff, but talking to beginners. Okay, some ways to identify if you're doing it wrong are if you're using metaphors that require them to be part of your own culture, right? Some metaphors work across cultures and some don't. If you're using terms that you expect them to know, but they don't actually know. If you were using words to kind of make yourself sound smarter or more sophisticated, when using simple language or plain language is going to make it clearer, right? So plain language is this idea that we write in more simple terms. That also makes it more accessible to more people. When you make it more accessible to those that need it, then it becomes more accessible to everyone. You might also be writing to the wrong level of student. So you need to match your language to where students are. Beginners need concrete examples and specific actions, and advanced learners can do more complex, abstract, kind of conceptual stuff. They need action-taking steps and benefit from very clear communication. So don't assume that they need the beginner stuff because that's frustrating. They'll leave. I was literally just having this conversation with someone who was frustrated because they had purchased and completed the beginner level course for this program, and then they signed up for the advanced one, and it was just repeating the same stuff that was in the beginner one. It wasn't building on that beginner step that they had already taken. So they left. So don't do that. You also want to make sure that when you are thinking about talking to the right level of student and making sure that you are being clear over clever, that you are balancing the concrete with the abstract, right? And so for beginners, what that might look like is instead of saying something like, optimize your content strategy. I'm sure that you've seen that phrase more times than you'd care to count. Say something like, if you don't like to be prescriptive, which I don't, and please don't tell me to post 3 times a week, I post once a week, figure out the posting timeline that works best for you, and then use that timeline to post when it works best for you. Instead of saying things like, develop your unique voice, which is another one, right? We see it everywhere. What the heck does that mean? You might instead say, write like you're explaining this to your best friend over coffee, right? So these are ways that you're kind of taking these abstract words that can mean many things and making them more concrete, more specific. And the more examples that you can give the better for beginners. For advanced folks, instead of optimize your course structure, be more specific and concrete and suggestive, right? So things like aim for 80% completion rates on individual modules. If you're below 70% completion rate, consider breaking your modules into smaller pieces. If you're above a 90%, great, keep going. Try to get your overall course structure up to 80%, right? Things like that. Another example for advanced folks might be, instead of improve student outcomes, you might say survey students within a week of finishing a lesson. You want to see at least 80% trying to implement one or more strategies. And at that point, at least 25% having success, and then check in again in 30 days, right? And so this is about taking the abstract concept and creating kind of an outline for action for what to actually be looking for. Improving student outcomes is fine and dandy, but how is that happening, right? And so this is how we take the abstract and make it something concrete. Advanced learners appreciate more concrete benchmarks because they understand the why behind these numbers, right? So if you're doing things like that with a beginner, for example, when I said post 3 times a week at these times, why the heck should I do that, right? A beginner might not understand the significance of posting that frequently or posting at those specific times. And it's not necessary to take the time to have a beginner understand those things, right? They need to just take the time to start creating a habit. That's where you are with a beginner. With someone that's advanced, they're going to take that habit and expand it because they understand the value of having created that habit. Advanced learners can take a framework and adapt it, but they need starting points and ideas of what success looks like for them in order to work from. The difference is that advanced learners can handle kind of multiple variables happening at one time. Like in all those examples, there were several things that they were looking for before moving on to the next step, right? And you can give them more nuanced examples because they already have a good grasp on the thing that you're trying to teach them. Okay, so that's a lot of theory that I've given you. So how to implement all of this, right? So you need to know what their experiences are. Don't guess. Do your market research. Once they've purchased, continue to do research. Continue to ask them what they know and don't know. And you can do this by surveying them, looking at the questions that they ask. Find out what courses they've taken. What language do they speak around the topic? You can often tell how advanced someone is in a topic when they're using the language of the topic. Another way to implement this is to kind of do a concrete sandwich, right? So starting with a concrete example and then giving the frameworks and then another concrete example, right? And so this is giving a real world example that gives them something to latch onto, right? Something that they can connect to their own experience before you give them the abstract thing. This helps them create that connection from the get-go. And then following it up with several examples to start bringing that abstract piece back into reality, right? This helps learners, kind of no matter what level they're at, to make connections between theory, the things that they already know, and then the things that could be. Another way that you can implement this is to use specific numbers, specific timeframes, specific actions. So previously we talked about posting consistently, right? So instead of just saying posting consistently, if you don't want to give prescriptive posting schedules, you can have them pick what consistency looks like for them and commit to those days and times that they have identified. Like, what is realistic? Okay, well then I'm going to post every Tuesday at 9 a.m. That is when I post to LinkedIn. Instead of things like engage with your audience, say respond to comments on your post within 4 hours and then ask a follow-up question, right? You could have a list of different ways that they can engage with their audience. Instead of track your progress, say check your metrics every Monday morning or every Thursday afternoon or whatever it happens to be, and then record your top 3 performing posts from the previous week, or they could do it monthly, or, whatever timeline you want to suggest to them, or you want them to set their own. The key here is being specific in the numbers and the timeframes and the actions. Another way to implement this is to replace concepts with behaviors that they can see, right? And so this all comes down to having those concrete goals for your course from the get-go. So for example, instead of saying you're going to help them be more authentic, say that you're going to support them with sharing one behind the scenes moment a week, right? Instead of building authority, you're going to support them in answering one question in their field every day for 30 days. Right? I'm not an expert in any of these things, so please don't use these as examples. These are just examples that I'm giving you. When you're learning something, you can see and measure behaviors. So they can see and measure the things that they're doing, the things that they're producing, the deliverables that they have. They can't measure abstract concepts. They can measure how they feel, right? Even though that is potentially an abstract concept, you can have them track it on a scale of 1 to 10. How did you feel at the beginning of the week versus how did you feel at the end? And so it's really important to start replacing the things that are kind of squishy and abstract with things that are more concrete. Not sure how your content in your course is doing? Run it by someone who is at the target level, but not in your immediate circle, like people that know you well. If they can't repeat back what you've said and what you want them to do and why, then your explanation isn't concrete enough yet. Once you do that, report back in the comments. Next time, we're going to tie together all of these principles of engagement into a complete system that keeps students engaged and moving forward without sacrificing the depth that makes your course valuable.